I hope that you are cozy and warm wherever you are, because we are buckling in for a really, really fantastic conversation. As Yoav mentioned, it has been a long March. It's been a long Women's History Month, and a necessary Women's History Month conversation that we wanted to have was around female leading photographers, female photographers in general. Recently, there have been a couple of reports that have come out, and a agency named Wallflower Studios compiled a bunch of research that basically showed the gender disparity in professional photography overall. One of the pinpointed statistics that was mentioned in the report was that although women make over 50% of the photography industry, they're dramatically underpaid and underrepresented compared to their male counterparts. And when we're speaking about women of color, Black women, non-white, Asian, Latina women, that's even less. So we really wanted to turn an eye on women photographers, leading brands that we love, that we want to hear from, that we want to hear their perspective and how they navigated a career in visual storytelling. So let me just swap over to a couple of these slides and share a bit of where we're going to have some conversation today. If you are not familiar with our PhotoShelter for Brands Slack community, it is a Slack community of over 1,400 creative marketers. And the way that you can join, if you're not in there already, is using this link, bit.ly/PSB Slack. That should take you right to the join landing page. All you have to do is put your email address and it should pop right open for you. Otherwise, you can take your phone and scan this QR code. It should take you, again, right to the Slack channel. Once you are in the Slack workspace, you will find a live chat channel, and that's where we're going to be taking all of your questions today for our speakers. And I will do a quick introduction to just let you know who we're going to be speaking with. I know you already saw those photos, but what about the photos that they actually take and that they direct? Let's see that too. So one of our first speakers, our most recent addition to this conversation, is Kalina Williams. She's a recent 2022 graduate from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in Charlotte, North Carolina. She received her bachelor's degree in journalism and mass communication with a concentration on mass media production. And I mean, look at her photos. These are her most recent photos, or not most recent, but most recent work with the Dallas Cowboys, where she is now a team photographer. Throughout her photographic career, she has shot collegiate football and basketball, along with track and field. And she's been, just around the sports industry as a Black female photographer, young female photographer, since she developed this passion in college. Having built a super solid foundation in sports photography. She first worked with the Miami Dolphins and at the Carolina Panthers, and now she is team photographer at the Cowboys. And she let me know in her bio, to make this a little bit more human and to let you know a little bit about her. On her spare time, you can find her reading multiple romance novels or creating amazing playlists on Spotify, and I can't wait to listen myself. Next is Marguerite Schrapp-Lucarelli. She is the Sports Illustrated Director of Photography and has held this title for the past 6 years. For the past 16 years, she's also been the Sports Illustrated Kids Director of Photography. So it's a rarity these days, but she spent her entire 28-year career at Sports Illustrated. I mean, wow, it's so impressive to me, and I can't wait for her to explain and share a little bit about her career journey and background, how she got there, how she stayed, how she elevated herself within the Sports Illustrated, consortium of media properties. She's contributed to Sports Illustrated Magazine, SI.com, SI Social, Video, as I said, Sports Illustrated Kids, Sports Illustrated Presents, and their campus area. So although she's oversigned all of this incredible work, one thing that we wanted to share of her recent work were these 4 covers honoring the Winter Olympian women female winners of the Olympics. There were 4 special covers created. We have Michaela Schifrin, Jessie Diggins, Erin Jackson, and Abby Roque. And these were 4 national covers that were published, everywhere. So grab yours today if you haven't. And also in 2020 for the Summer Games, they photographed Simone Biles. And I mean, just look at the power, the beauty, the color tone, everything. Gorgeous. So welcome, Marguerite. And lastly, Sydney Scott. Sydney Scott has been a professional photographer since graduating from Ohio University in 1998. So for the past 24 years, she has been a professional photographer, elevating herself. For the first 10 years, she was shooting newspapers in upstate New York, then Palm Beach County in Florida, before moving back to her home city of Boston. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island. Yes, go East Coast, New England. Wicked smart. And joining BU Photography. She is currently teaching an advanced course on photojournalism for BU's College of Communications, and she is the VP of the University of Photographers Association of America, and a co-writer with a group of 4 other folks who wrote a best practices, the first of its kind, best practices for inclusive and diverse photography in higher education. Super important. Students come from all over, every kind of background, really important to pay, honor, and celebrate that. And I just couldn't believe that she was a writer of it. I was so excited to add her to this conversation and hear more about her background in developing that first of a kind guide. She lives in Medford, Massachusetts, and she has a rescue dog named Harlow. So I will now invite us all to join Slack, pay attention here, and get your questions ready as we dive into conversation with these ladies. Welcome, Marguerite, Kalina, and Sydney to the stage, the virtuals.
Hello. Hi, Larissa.
Hello.
Hi, y'all. Yay.
Thanks for having us today.
I am so glad that you all could make it, that we all got our tech stuff figured out. How's everybody feeling? Where are you all hailing from? Let's start with Marguerite, because you're right to my right.
Sure. I'm in my living room in New York and Upper East Side.
Awesome. Sydney, where are you?
I am in my crafting room in my house in Medford, Mass, and I'm hoping no deliveries come and the dog will stay quiet. Yeah.
You can add Harlow to the talk. I can't wait. And Kalina, where are you with all the gear? Yes.
In the conference room at the Star in Frisco.
Woo! Yes. Okay, Texas. So, ladies, we are just going to hop right into it. And to let everyone know, I have shared these questions with all of our speakers prior to, because we will be talking about some sensitive topics. And I wanted everybody to feel really comfortable enough to answer and to share with you all today. So we're going to get into them, and all right, let's go. We've also got some folks joining from Greensboro, from one of our best. Oh, I just have to share this shout out really quickly. Jeff Noyan said, Kalina, that you were one of the best Miami Dolphins interns. Whoop whoop, she's a rock star, he says. So super excited. Everybody has fans here. I hope that everyone is listening in. So all right, let's just get right into it. So I'm gonna start with Kalina, because you just graduated 2 years ago. Tell me, how did you, this is going to be asked of everyone and I'll just throw it around the room, but how did you get your start in photography? What brought you to the career you have now?
I started in high school, actually. I was in the IB program, and one of the requirements was that you had to have an art class. And so it was either actual art, like painting and drawing and whatnot, or photography. And I chose photography because I tried my hand at writing or at drawing in art, and it just wasn't for me. So I tried to do photography, and I found that I really liked it. I think the driving force of me liking it so much is that our teacher started us off with film. And so I think we were one of the only schools in our school system with a dark room. And so I was able to go in and actually take pictures, develop the film, have the dark room, develop the prints, using an enlarger, all that kind of stuff. So I think if I didn't have that intro, I probably wouldn't maybe have not have been in this field, but it was that introduction that made me really just fall in love with the art of photography. And so I started off doing like portraits and landscapes, nature type stuff. I didn't even think that sports photography was even a thing. I think up until I got to college, when I joined the yearbook as a photographer, and my first assignment was the homecoming football game in 2016. And from there, I've never left the field. I've never missed a single home game in college. I missed one game my senior year. And that was just because I just didn't have a ride. So I made sure that I was never, ever like not on the field. If there was a time that I was on the field, I was going to be on there, and I was going to be growing and making sure that I was doing the best that I could, like no matter what. So when I graduated, or when I got my first internship with the Dolphins, I was already a fan of their work. I mean, I had all their pictures saved in my Instagram archives, just I was trying to recreate some of the angles that they've done in college. And so when I got the internship, it was just like, like a dream come true. And so from there, I learned so much. That was where I learned that I liked capturing more emotional things more than just like the action. I love the action. The action's cool. Obviously, I was a football fan as a child, so it was all just coming together nicely. But the emotion was mostly that's where I learned more. The emotion was really kind of like the driving force behind a lot of these, behind what makes, the social page great. Like people would like to see that emotional side of the players too. So that was something I really focused on when I got back from my senior year of college, making sure to focus on the emotion of the players, which was kind of easy because these players were schoolmates. Like I was in classes with them. I kind of knew some of them, so it was easy to kind of show that other side. And I realized the more I went along, that was just something I really loved to do, was just show the human side of these players outside of them just being like freakishly human athletes. Like what kind of music do they like? Why do they like to dress up? What are their favorite clothing brands? This kind of stuff. So, and then in the pandemic, I was, just sitting at home, chilling. I didn't have anything to do. Nobody was hiring. There was no sports things going on until they decided to like bring the season back late. And then I got a message from the team photographer at the time for the Panthers, was Brandon Todd. And he DM'd me on Instagram and was like, I need a second shooter. I saw your work. I really like it. And I was like, wow, that was just lucky. I thought it was fake at first. I was like, it was just a random DM, didn't even think about it, didn't even know, on a random day, maybe like a month before the season started. I was already content that like, I'm just gonna have to watch football from my TV for the first time. So I was able to be a shooter for all the home games. And having to shoot from the stands, I feel like gave me another viewpoint of how to tell the story. And I think everything that I learned from the season with the Panthers and then my Dolphins internship and all 4 years of college, I feel like that the Cowboys saw a lot of potential in me, and I'm very thankful for them for giving me the position. So yeah, that was my journey.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's like,
I love, Kalina, that you started with film, because I think it's something that all new photographers should have to do. Not even necessarily film. You should be restricted to 36 frames, right? So that you can learn to slow down. And yeah, that's cool.
Sydney, why don't you start sharing? Tell
Okay.
us about your career.
Sure. So I started shooting in junior high for like the yearbook or whatever. And I continued in high school, and I enjoyed it, but it was a hobby. And one day I was in an antique store with my mom, and we were looking through old Life magazines. And I'm flipping through, and I open it, and there's this double truck of Alfred Eisenstadt's The Dragon is Slain, which if you're not familiar with it, I recommend Googling it. It's a photo from the early 60s, and Eisenstadt had gone to the park in Paris and was watching these children who were watching a puppet show. And so he sat in front of the puppet show while it was above him and was shooting towards the kids, and he photographed them the moment the dragon was slain. And there's a huge array of expression. And just seeing that photo, like, it clicked for me, and suddenly I got it. I was like, oh, that's what it's for. Like, that's what photography is for. It's for capturing moments like that. And oh, I can capture emotion, and I can, you know, grab these moments, and also, like, oh, it's a job, like it's a career that you can do. So that's sort of where that happened, and sort of where I started thinking about the word photojournalism and the career of photojournalism. And I had just started looking into colleges, and a friend of my mom said, you know, Ohio University is like known for photojournalism. And I think by luck I got in. I'm not the best academic student, so it was like a skin of my teeth kind of thing. I was very relieved. And Ohio was a really great experience. It was challenging, it was competitive, and it got me ready for the world of newspaper journalism. So from there, I had a couple of internships: Cleveland Plain Dealer, Evansville Courier and Press, and then I had my first job at the Auburn Citizen in upstate New York, which was a super interesting and I think really good experience because it was really hard. It's a fairly rural area. It's fairly low income, and you know, we had to produce work every day. So it was a challenge to get out in the community and shoot great images every day. So that was a really nice challenge, and along what Kalina does, but not nearly as good. You know, we had to shoot football on Friday nights, and it was freezing, and the schools had no money, so there was no lights on the field. And so I appreciate that starting off experience, because I really had to work hard to try and make good work and get better at it. And then it was time to move on, and I nabbed a job at the Palm Beach Post, and I was there for 6 years. Another incredible learning experience. 22 photographers, I believe 6 women, and so that was an experience. And then, you know, there was always in newspapers, and even today, this threat of layoff. And an opportunity came where they were offering buyouts, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to push to get a job in another newspaper somewhere and then find that I have to start all over, like in my life, like make new friends and, you know, do that. So I decided to come back home, and it was really interesting because once you're a journalist in that way, like in newspapers, you maybe you do realize, I didn't realize when I left newspapers, I was like, wow, that's a really huge part of my identity. And so that was a really interesting adjustment to make. And I was home and fortunate enough to be able to hang out with my parents and live there. And I was just kind of trying everything I could to see what would stick. The photography freelance field here in Boston is so saturated that like getting freelance work was really hard. So I was teaching classes, and I was doing portrait work, and I started doing some weddings, and I was teaching lessons, and I had an epiphany that I could be a birth photographer. And it turns out that the only people who want their births photographed are like crunchy granola hippie people who also don't care about money, so they can't pay for that service to happen. But the few births I did photograph were completely life-changing and amazing. And then the job came up for BU, and I got lucky and I got it. And I've been there 11 years, and it's been really great. I work for BU Today primarily, which is our online news and marketing site. So I can still shoot in that photojournalistic way, except the hours are better, and I have good benefits, and I can take days off, and I get holidays and stuff. So that's where I am right now.
We love a rest day. We love a rest.
Yeah.
That's great. And so just wanted to let everybody know too, as the ladies are sharing during this conversation, we're sharing some of their work also in the live chat. So if you want to follow up and learn a little bit more about their work, stay tuned in the live chat. And Marguerite, share with us how you have elevated yourself in the past 28 years at Sports Illustrated. I mean, I know and we all heard a little bit about it yesterday, but would love to hear about that because that is so rare today, and I'm trying to learn.
Sure. So unlike Kalina and Sydney, I'm a picture editor. I'm not a photographer. So though we are in the same industry, we kind of all have similar paths to that point. So anyhow, how did I get my start? Is you know, as a seventh grader, I fell in love with the Olympics. I thought, oh, it would be so great to go to the Olympics. Unfortunately, I'm not a very strong athlete, so that was not going to happen. But when I was a senior in high school, I went to the Detroit Institute of Arts with my dad, my family, and we went to, like Sydney, a Margaret Burke White exhibit, Life magazine photographer. And I thought it was so cool and I loved it. And I said to my dad, I said, you know, I really want a camera when I graduate from high school. So my mom and dad bought me a camera. But I thought to myself, I've always wanted to go to the Olympics, and I'm not a strong athlete, but what if I were a photographer? I could go to the Olympics that way. So that was my thought. And I went to school, St. Mary's, Notre Dame, and freshman year started working at the Observer, our daily newspaper, and sophomore year I started photographing the football games. And this was about 1990, and Notre Dame had an excellent football team. So I was assigned to 3 football games in a row, probably not knowing what I was doing at all. And I, you know, before the game, I noticed one of the photographers had his credential. It said Sports Illustrated. I thought, well, you know, I'm gonna follow him around and see what I can learn. So I did, and I thought I was being very discreet, and you know, he'd get up, and a couple seconds later, I'd get up and move down the field. So this was 3 football games in a row. And at the third football game, very end of the game, we were both sort of kneeling in the end zone, and he looked over to me and he's like, you know, you've been following me around for the past 3 football games. I was like completely mortified, and I was like, my quick response was, well, you know, I saw that you were from Sports Illustrated, so I thought I learned from the best. And he was like, hey, I liked that, so I want you to apply for an internship. So I did. And so I was a sophomore, but in order to get an internship at Sports Illustrated, you have to be a junior. So I reapplied the following year, and they offered me an internship, and I spent the summer of '92 in New York working on the Olympics. I was, they had me working in the archives, collating all the Olympic pictures. That was my main responsibility that summer, was working on Olympic things. I wasn't editing, I was producing nothing for the magazine. I was doing an archival project, which was great. And I loved every second of it. So then fast forward, I had to go back to St. Mary's to do my student teaching, and the entire time I was thinking, how could I get back to New York, you know, to do this dream job? I never thought it would be a career. I was going to be a bilingual elementary school teacher. So anyhow, 2 weeks before I graduated, Sports Illustrated offered me a job to come back. I did, and I've been there since. So I basically grew up there, starting doing the smallest things. Always a picture editor, never a photographer. Editing faces in the crowd, which were like headshots. You know, I was like, wow, this is awesome. From there, you know, grew up working on the NBA for many years, working on SI Kids, and now being the director of photography for the magazine.
So incredible. What an amazing trajectory. So my follow-up question was going to be, who was someone who inspired you when you first started out? But I feel as though you all kind of shared that with your stories. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, who was the first like female artist or photographer that you remember seeing and thinking like, oh, I want to be like, or like, I want to do that too? And how was it when you first approached that first, you know, female photographer? I know we kind of got into competitive energy when you're younger, first starting, but would love to hear from all of your different perspectives what that was like at first, and who was the first, I guess, yeah, female photographer, female artist you were like, oh, yep, I can do this too. Sydney, do you want to start?
Sure. It's a really interesting question because I don't know that there was one in particular. I mean, I know for sure that I saw a photo of Margaret Burke White balancing on the Chrysler building. And I was like, well, that's a thing. I don't want to do it, but that's a thing. And this is like a slight digression, but it's relevant. I was raised by creative people. My dad's an architect, my mom's an interior designer. So like creativity in our household was very normal and like accepted. So I didn't run into any like barriers there. But as far as like feeling inspired by a woman, I wasn't necessarily like literally inspired by my mom, but my mom set an example that there isn't a place where you don't belong. In her actions, she was that way. It wasn't an entitlement of like, I can go anywhere I want to. It was, as a woman, if I can do the job, I belong in that space. And so I was surrounded by, I was raised by two people who never suggested that I didn't belong in the field. So it wasn't a matter of like me seeing a woman and being like, oh, now I can do that job. Because I always thought like, well, just because men are doing it doesn't mean I don't belong there. Like, you know, and certainly when I got into newspapers, you know, it's a good old boys club. You know that. But, you know, you see photos like Margaret Burke White, you see Dorothea Lange's photos, and those are like older shots that those were taken a while ago. So like these trailblazers existed so that we could do it and not feel totally weird about it. So there was that. When I went to Ohio University, we had maybe 5 instructors and one of them was a woman, Marcy Nicewander. And I was like, all right, cool, that's normal. And then my fellow students, there were a lot of women in the class with me. So it wasn't ever a time where I felt like this was a weird field for, not a weird field for women to be in, but it just never occurred to me that I don't belong there. Yeah. The only time it occurred to me that I don't belong there early in my career is whether I was not good enough to be there, you know? So that's sort of, I'm like vaguely answering your question, but that's sort of like what comes to mind when I think about that question. Marilyn Mark, I loved early on. She didn't shoot in a way that I wanted to, but I liked her as a person. There was a professional woman who was like on a fellowship at OU. She was not a nice person. She was competitive. She was not kind. I was like, well, that's not what I want to be. So you learn, you know, along the way, things you want to do and things you don't want to do. So hopefully that answers it, sort of.
That was perfect. Yes, thank you so much. And similarly, I'll just say this. I think the first line in the registration page is "a woman's place is everywhere." I was like, yes, I needed to just say that out loud and write it somewhere because that's damn true. Okay. Kalina, what about you?
My the first exposure I had to like a woman in this field was Melissa and Melvin Rodriguez, who was the team photographer for the Panthers before Brandon. I think I was just like sitting in bed and it was right before that breaking point where I realized that I wanted to be in the sports industry. I was looking up, you know, who takes pictures for the Carolina Panthers. This is when I was first starting with football photography in college. And I'm like, well, who just takes pictures for them? And I saw like the name. I was like, oh, it's a woman. I never knew that. Like, and so just seeing that for the first time, I was like, okay, well, at least I know that that's something that is a thing, and no woman on the fields and actually taking pictures, gaining that access and being able to tell those stories without having to necessarily be attached to a newspaper or something or magazine or something like that, just like with the team specifically. And even in college, when I first got started, one of my good friends who was on the yearbook with me, who was a woman, who she was shooting the football team as well. And so, I mean, I kind of followed up after her footsteps. And she went in a different direction than me, but you know, it was her that kind of got me into that role to begin with. So I guess in a way, like, and then the more I get into the industry, the more I found out more people, more graphic designers like Chanel. Before she was with the Panthers, I met her. Just a few other people. I can't think of everybody right now, of course. Everybody, it all wants to go blank, but like, just there were so many people there that it was very comforting that I wasn't alone. And so I've never been one to be like competitive with everybody that I met. I don't know. I've just never been a competitive person. I just kind of like to go with the flow. So I just like to be comforted by the fact that I'm just not alone. And so that's kind of more the approach that I take.
I love that. I very much, as a writer and somebody who's like in the media industry in New York, I feel very much like I'm not in competition with everyone. I just want to know everybody. I just want to share their stories. Like I'm a lover of people. I'm not trying to fight with folks. So, but I totally know what it feels like to, be one of one. And so, yeah, seeing other folks that either look like you or just other women who are doing exactly the same kind of job as you must feel like so incredibly supportive to know that you're not, alone in trying to kind of blaze this trail. And Marguerite, what about you?
Sure. I went to that Burke White exhibit, and that was just, cool to see. It wasn't like I was going to go to factories and photograph pictures. I had no connection other than like, wow, this is a female photographer. But I graduated from St. Mary's College, Notre Dame. It's all women's college. And like I said before, I was studying education, and I had a professor, Dr. Carol Lee Watson. She was a woman, very strong, powerful woman. She was the chair of our department. I remember her taking me aside one day and saying, Marguerite, if you don't have to be a teacher, if you want to be a photographer, if you want to make this work, just do it, And my parents are always supportive, right? But the fact that like Dr. Watson was like, just do it, in college gave me that confidence. Like I'm gonna do this, And I have to tell you, in 1993, in the early 90s, I never thought like, oh, I'm different because I'm a female. To me, I grew up going to a women's college, having that support, just being like, yeah, we're equal, with such a confidence booster. I never thought of it like that. And when I got to SI, you mentioned like what photographer inspired us. I didn't really have a female photographer. We didn't work with female photographers. But my coworker, Maureen Grice Kavanaugh, she's now at the New York Times. We came to SI at the same time, and we grew up together there. I would have to say that we encouraged each other to like put up with the very difficult department we worked in. It was a lot of personalities. And so I would say Maureen and I think we always encouraged each other and to do the best that we possibly could. And working at some place like Sports Illustrated, they don't want you to grow up there, right? They want you to already know. They want you to be confident already. So I think back now, I think, God, why? Boy, that was a risk that they took, bringing me along at 21 years old and, working at a college newspaper. That was my background, But I think what Heinz Klutmeyer, director of photography, then thought was that he could mold us into what we needed to be. And so for that, I'm grateful that Heinz did take that chance and hired me, 28 years ago.
I love that. I feel like that's also such a confidence booster. Like not seeing, I was watching something last night that said, we'll never see ourselves the way other folks see us. And so I feel like what you're talking about, it's so important for other people to choose you and to see you. And then you take on that confidence, and it kind of really feels like superhuman. You're like, yes, I do belong here. I can do this, and I'm going to. In fact, I'm going to, and all that doubt falls away. That's amazing. And so along a similar line, I guess more related to just the art of it all, did folks in your life, like I know that we've been talking about, education, like our professors and folks in work that supported you, or managers, teachers, et cetera, kind of boosting confidence. But did your peers, meaning like your literal friends who were also growing up with you, hearing about your dreams, making their own, and your parents, like people really close to you, did they take your creativity seriously? And how did that either help or hinder in, your kind of development and claiming this dream and making it real? Marguerite, do you want to start?
Sure. My family and my friends have always supported the idea. really good friends at the newspaper at Notre Dame. We would cheer each other along, you know, encourage, oh, you're going to be the director, I'm going to be the director. Like we set really high goals for ourselves. We weren't just going to be the picture editor or just the photo assistant, but yeah, I think you need to have that cheerleading, those people behind you, because it is a risk, and the job is not easy, right? You know, it's very stressful. You have a lot on the line. You know, this magazine has to close and go to 6 million people, and you better have your story done, and it better have, you've done it well too. But yeah, my friends, family, you know, people are like, oh, Sports Illustrated, oh, the swimsuit issue, you know, things like that. You know, oh, what's it like? Do you meet famous people? No, you know, it's a lot of hard work. And sometimes people think like probably Kalina, oh, you know, you're with, you know, all the famous cowboys. What's it like? You know, do you hang out with them? No, this is a job, you know, kind of thing. They, you know, they're always in awe, and you tell them the story and you're just like, yeah, you know, but it's a job. But it's a job that I love, and it's different every single day. I mean, there's never been two stories that have been the same in the past 28 years.
That's incredible. I really can't imagine what it feels like to have everybody's total support, you know, like in your inner circle, but also at work too. Sydney, what about you?
Yeah, I you know, again, I grew up in a creative household, so I think I literally turned to my dad sometime in the last 10 years and said, when I decided to be a photographer, were like you and mom, like, what? Were you concerned about that at all? And just the fact that it never even occurred to me that they were nervous about that until I was, you know, 35 is when I, you know, thought to ask him. And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, we were a little nervous, and we sort of thought, well, I guess you can make a career at it. And he goes, and then you were okay at it, so we didn't have to worry about it. But just, I feel like that's a testament to them to begin with, that it didn't even occur to me that like, oh, they might give me a hard time about this, or that wasn't even an issue. And I think, I mean, as far as having people who bolstered me in my life, I don't know that there was bolstering in my early career as much as there was competitiveness. You know, at Ohio University, you have people who want to be photojournalists. They're real serious about it. And a lot of the classes that you're taking with grad students. So then you also have people who have some like real life experience, and then they're coming back with even more drive to join this field. So I think a lot of the discouragement came from me and my insecurity in my own skin and my worries about whether I was good enough compared to everyone else around me. Because if you compare yourself to everyone else around you, you realize, well, I'm going to be competing with them for jobs. So I really need to be good enough at it. So, you know, and there were other aspects of getting the job that were really difficult, like schmoozing was a thing. Like you used to have to go to conferences, and you used to like, oh, go and get a portfolio review and go talk to this editor and go. And I was just not having it. I was like, I just want to get hired for being able to do the job. I don't feel like talking to you. So fortunately, it didn't bite me anywhere, but it worked out fine. But yeah, I do feel like a lot of the discouragement I got was totally from me, completely. It's specifically early on. Like now I'm very comfortable in my skin. I feel like I'm decent at what I do. Like in this conversation, I have a little bit of a like imposter syndrome. Like, how did I even get here? But you know, I think we can all be our own worst enemies sometimes. So I was really fortunate to be surrounded by people who didn't give me a hard time, who were supportive. Yeah. I
know about that imposter syndrome feeling so much, and you and I have spoken about this too on, you know, our personal calls, but woo, what it is to be a woman in this patriarchy today. I mean, it's just like imposter syndrome is just hitting you from everywhere. So I totally feel you, and what a gift it is to have, you know, parents who are uber supportive too. I really
100% makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Kalina, and I know that you talking about comparisons and whatnot, you know, your advice to your younger self was stop comparing yourself to others. So what about you? You know, how has the supportive community around you? What are their thoughts about your, you know, photographic career or development of it as it still continues?
there's never been a time like throughout my career where my parents were like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Whatever I said that I wanted to do, they were like, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and pray about it. And so you'll get it. And so that's what I heard for most of my career. Um, like from my Dolphins internship, from the Panthers to now, it didn't even matter what teams they were actually fans of. They were buying the gear, they were watching the games, they were going to the games, all that kind of stuff. They were cheering me on. Like my mom is a Panthers fan. She has way more Cowboys gear than I do at this point. My dad is a Dolphins fan.
Please tell me she has a jersey with your name on it. Please tell me she made a jersey with your name on it. That would be amazing.
The idea, so so she's probably very close to it. But my dad is a diehard Dolphins fan from before I was even born, and he has Cowboys gear. So I mean, it was just always continuous support. She's bought some of my gear when some of my gear went, down the hole, that kind of stuff. So I mean, I've never had like that kind of stereotypical parents where they're like, well, art isn't a real career and they won't make enough money and that kind of stuff, like all that kind of stuff. I never had that. So I've always had a great support system. Even in college with friends, they were always supportive of me, even before I got to sports, mainly because they got free pictures out of it, but still, like, they were still supportive of me. I had all types of nicknames in college. Anybody who needed a picture, it was my name that they were giving to somebody. They still, hyped me up today. When I first got my internship with the Dolphins, they were posting me everywhere on their accounts, congratulations, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I've had probably like the best, I feel like I had like the best support system for everything, because there were so many times where I was like, this is not great. I hate this picture. This picture is ugly. I didn't do good. I don't think I'm deserving of this role. And they're always there to just kind of bring me back. So I love them. They're great.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so important to have that grounding energy too. Like as you're building your career, I feel like having those people that can constantly affirm, like, no, you do belong there. Your art is incredible. And yeah, the stereotypical art parent thoughts, I think, is what I was thinking of when I was thinking about this question, because I feel like it's shifting. There's so many also ways that people can engage with creativity today, that I think it is less stigmatized when people say that they want to, pursue a career in any kind of art. So I am just thrilled that all of you have the support, and now you can call all of your PhotoShelter family your supporters too. So that's fantastic. And so now that was a little bit about y'all's background and where you came from and how you kind of built, your confidence and cemented your place in your industry now. So we're going to shift towards some questions about what's going on currently and how you feel currently about your career. So I wanted to know, since you all kind of have a little bit of a different industry that you're working in. Marguerite, you're in like sports media, but more media. Sydney, you're working in higher ed, but also media, journalism, photojournalism. And then Kalina, you're deeply rooted in the sports industry and the sports industry consortium of things and major leagues. So just wanted to know how it feels to be a woman leading in those, what seem to me, male-dominated fields, because I think men have been dominating things in general for a long time. So just what does it feel like, I guess, currently to be a woman leader and have your voice heard and respected in your industry today? Kalina, do you want to start, since sports is super, male dominated?
It's a lot of pressure. Like I personally put a lot of pressure on myself, because I know, being one of the first, me and Chanel being hired like within weeks of each other, I feel like there was a lot of pressure, or just we are the only ones right now. And so because of that, I feel like we have to perform on a way higher level maybe than most. And it's not like the other photographers who are in this industry are like mediocre. They're amazing photographers, but I just feel like there's just a lot more pressure on our ends, because we're kind of like leading a trail, and hopefully we are bringing in more people, more interest of people who look like us into this field. And so there's never really a time where we can, or at least I feel like there was never a time where I could, you know, slack off or just have an off day. And so, and it might not be true, but like that's just how I felt ever since I got in this industry. And I knew if I was ever to be in a position where I was one of the first Black female team photographers, I knew the amount of pressure that was probably going to be on me just in general, and then also what I was going to put on myself. But I also just feel very thankful to be in a position like this, to, you know, where other people can see me and be like, okay, this is something I can definitely do, or just bring that encouragement to people who are not really sure of themselves or scared to think that, well, if the way I look can't give me, like, I'm the example that the way you look doesn't necessarily mean that there's not somebody out there who isn't going to believe in you. So there's always somebody there on your side and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yes. I know that we talked a little bit about this. I will be throwing this question around the room, but I wanted to just jump off of what you were talking about being one of the first, if not the first and second. Chanel Smith Walker, who you were talking about, we were also going to speak with her, but she needed to take a step back because she has been super overcommitted, just in terms of like her literal full-time job and every single other thing that she's doing outside, to also bring representation to Black female photographers in sports. But she's the Carolina Panthers team photographer, and I know that you have kind of seen each other / overlap, know who each other is. But I did ask you this on our call yesterday, and I said, you know, what does it feel like to be, you know, like a Black woman photographer in sports? And you were like, well, I don't really know because I'm one of one. So I don't know how it feels to be, you know, around in an industry of, oh, I'm being supported by other folks who look like me. Can you share a little bit about that experience also? Like we're also, just to mention, you know, watching on the world stage, regardless of politics, a Black woman in the first of its kind role in the Supreme Court justice, almost confirmed, you know, really taking somewhat of a abuse, I would say, in the regards to the questions about her defending her actual judicial career. So it's really, we're seeing like on full display the twice as hard for half as much kind of, you know, stereotype about Black women and Black people working in the workforce. So I just wanted to mention that and talk a little bit about that. But I do hope that your being there, that you can feel that you don't need to be overly exceptional. You just are enough, and that what you bring to the table is enough, and that's what they were looking for, you know? Yeah. Sydney, do you want to share a little bit about what it's like to be, I know that you said you do have some, you had some peers in school who are women photographers, but what is it like, you know, being a female photographer in the higher ed space in particular today?
I think it's a good question because I've never been anything other than female, so I don't know how it would be to be in this space as a photographer and look differently or embody somebody different than I am. So I only know what I know. I mean, I think so I think the best way that I can answer this is that I have a great advantage in many ways being female shooting in higher ed. And in my mind, it is. I don't look at my job, quite honestly, and think, man, I wish I was a dude. Like, this would be easier if I was a guy. Like, it's just not. I don't. Like, I'm content with me as I am and the photographer that I am. But being a woman gives me a kind of access and freedom of movement that I would not have if I were a man. You know, years ago, like, okay, so for example, Kalina, like, do you ever hang out in the locker room?
I was not allowed in the locker room because of COVID.
Oh, well, okay, but like, so my point is that like I've done stories about the field hockey team. Some of the greatest moments happen in the locker room. you know, and I can't go in there if I'm male. Now, there are a lot of stories that need to be told about male teams. It's not going to happen because I don't want to go into the male locker room. So like someone else is going to have to do that because I don't want to do it. But, you know, years ago, I did a story about BU at night where I shot photos from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on campus over like a period of weeks. And I wanted to get into a dorm and I wanted to wander freely within that dorm. And like, technically I wasn't supposed to do that. I needed to connect with an RA and then an RA would need to walk around with me. And I didn't want to burden them with that. And I didn't want that photographically. So I went into one of the dorms. I'm like announcing this like evidence of what I did, but I went into one of the dorms and there was a guy with a pizza. And I was like, well, someone's going to come claim that pizza. And sure enough, a student comes down and I explained to her what I'm doing. And she's like, sure, you can come in as my guest. Would not have happened if I was a man. There's absolutely no way. And then if I was a man, like continuing to wander the dorm would have been problematic. And as a woman, I can just do that. And I don't have that threat. As a white woman, I don't have that problem. You know, I'm aware of that as well. So there are lots of ways, like even just wandering the school buildings. It's very rare that somebody's like, hey, can I help you? Whereas if I were a man and they didn't recognize me right away, I might be given a hard time about it. When I used to work in newspapers, there was a competitiveness that seemed to be worse with the men, where if you would go and talk to them and say, hey, that's lit really well, how did you shoot that? They would change the subject. They would absolutely not share with you how they did it. If they were working on projects, they're not going to tell you what projects they're working on because they don't want you to like steal their idea or something like that. And that does not exist in higher ed for me. I have one other photographer colleague. She is also female. My art director is female. There are many women on managerial positions within Marcom that are female. So it's pretty awesome. And then I've connected with the University Photographers Association of America. Man, that's a mouthful. And the minute I joined that group, there's an immediate camaraderie. You can go up to any person in that group and say, hey, tell me about a story you're working on, and they will tell you. You can look at any photo and say, how did you do that? And they will tell you how they did it. And they'll be like, oh, wait, let me geek out and show you how I did it. So like that kind of camaraderie that changed in higher ed, that didn't exist with newspaper photojournalism, was like night and day, and I absolutely welcomed it. And then like going back to like being female, it has only in my mind worked to my advantage. If it has worked to my disadvantage, I'm too naive to notice it. Like I haven't, and quite frankly, I'm kind of okay with that. Like if it's not hurting anybody, that I'm naive, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. I hope I answered.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's so interesting because I knew we were going to get such a range of, you know, answers from everyone and per industry. And Marguerite, lastly, just at SI, since you have been in also so many different roles, I wonder if that's shifted. Being a woman, has it, you know, hindered you in any way? And also in now that you're leading, how has that affected you and your role also?
I love being the leader. It's a great feeling. I love to lean in at those conference tables, be it virtual conference tables now, when I look at the Zoom grid and I'm one or two of 10, you know, 10 people in the group, 2 of us are female. It's a great feeling. It's a proud feeling. Like, listen, my opinion, my idea, my curiosity is equal to everyone else sitting at this table. So I have a great feeling. I also have the luxury of, you know, growing up at SI, but the editors I work with did as well. So Steve Canella, Mark Bechtel, we've all been there for 28 years, and now they're my bosses. They're the managing editors of the magazines too. And so since we grew up together, I have that extra luxury of them knowing me well, knowing like my work ethic, my thought, the types of pictures I want to make, and they back me up, and that's pretty awesome. I think if say the editors changed and and I was the only one there from the past and working with new, how different that would be. I'm sure it would be very different because you have to start all over again and let people, because trust is so important, right? And trust in each other is so important. And I have that with the editors I work with. We've worked together for a long time. So it's a great feeling. I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Hell yeah, yes. And as we were talking a little bit yesterday, know that, this conversation really doesn't end here. Like this support group now has formed, and so you all have each other to lean on too, and each other to learn from. And I love that. I really love fostering these kinds of spaces where you can now freely and openly chat with each other, offline outside of this, but also go to each other as like mentors and mentees, like back and forth. And I think that's really great. So I just realized that I'm about halfway through my questions and we're almost at 3 p.m. So I want to just invite everyone to, look at their clock, look at the rest of their calendar. I'm going to ask about 3 more questions from my set. And then I do have a couple from the audience. Do you all have time to stay on for about 15 more minutes?
Sure.
Great, great. Okay, awesome. So just as a follow-up to that, I just wanted to know a little bit about how each of you now, in terms of concepting and ideating and project managing, how important is it for you to do 2 things? Make sure that there are more than one woman within that process of like ideation, project management, and actual talent that's either shooting, documenting, or being highlighted. And how do you all approach that within your organization? So just creating more space for women to be seen, heard, and elevated within the creative process of your brand. Let's see.
I think at Sports Illustrated, we've never, okay, I shouldn't say never, but within my time period there, we never made it a point to say, oh, do we have a female? Do we have a black athlete? Do we have a white athlete? Do we have a brown athlete? Like those are conversations we have today. When we're though we planned the Olympic preview covers, those 4 that we showed early on, no one ever said, oh wait, where's the male, right? So I feel like it is taking a very long time, but now we're like, yeah, this is great. We have 4 awesome female athletes on the cover. I'm going to say 15 years ago that wouldn't have happened. Definitely the majority would have been men, or they would all been men, and maybe we would have had the token female athlete. And Simone, she was she was the national cover. We actually photographed that last year for the 2021-20 Olympics. Yeah, I mean, that has a lot to do with the things we talk about these days. We have SI.com has a daily cover story, and a lot of those stories go talking about female athletes and having we've had so many of these types of stories. We're so cognizant of of today's world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important, and I wanted to hear about that, like how has it actually shifted over time? That is super, super interesting and necessary, necessary. And it really, I think, just comes with time, and also the cultural shift and tolerance and acceptance as well. Sydney, what about you? And because I know that you all are, you have just developed, well, not recently, but developing that guide to inclusivity and diversity in higher ed photography. I'm sure that all of these kinds of conversations came up within your group while you were writing it.
Yes. It's so big. Where do I start? I mean, I guess as far as answering the question for my world and my job, like what I do is really fairly autonomous. So when you're talking about the original question of, are there projects you're working on? Are there things that you're formulating? And how do they come to fruition? It's pretty common that I'm just sort of saying, well, I'd like to learn more about this, so I'm going to do a story on it, right? And then I go to my editor and it goes from there. I don't typically pick a particular writer if a writer needs to be on it. It has more to do with like who would be interested in doing that topic if a writer is needed for it. my art director, Janice Checchio, is great to work with. And I bounce ideas off her really regularly. And she is, this is slightly off topic, but she's incredibly good for when something annoys me and I want to write a strongly worded email. I send it to her first and she's like, yeah, no. So that's a camaraderie that I really, really appreciate in her. But, you know, I'm not totally in a position, well, I'm in a position from the way I document campus to do it in a way with that diversity and inclusion in mind. So if I'm looking at this question, not from the point of being a woman and whether I'm surrounded by women, it has to do with me documenting the space in a way that is accurate and not leaning in certain ways because I feel like maybe this would be useful later. For example, if I enter into a space and all people are equal, and what I mean by that is it's a bunch of students sitting at tables studying, and they all have generally the same environments. If they're mostly white and there's one Black student, I will specifically not photograph that Black student unless they are in an environment that has some kind of compositional element that tells a story. Because in my mind, if I'm going to photograph that Black student, I am tokenizing that Black student. I am specifically targeting that Black student because they're a Black student. And so those are things on a day-to-day basis that I think about when I'm shooting, that when I'm shooting, I want to be documenting the moments that are happening and not the people that they're happening with, while also being aware that it takes all of these people to make up the campus, and that students who are considering coming to the school need to know what that makeup is before they come. I'm totally digressing, I realize, and I apologize for that, but it's just sort of where my brain went. So I'll let Kalina answer because I feel like I'm just going to keep.
No, that's, I mean, that is another
in a weird direction.
No, that was another question I was going to ask. So thank you.
Sorry.
No, thank you for leaning into it in your own way. I think that was really important. I coming from a private Quaker school that I went to when I was growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, I was often the one Black person that was, and I'm biracial, so I was like the one brown person that was photographed to like showcase the diversity at our school of 9 out of like, 500. So cool. I actually appreciate that.
And it was probably continued to use like years after you left too, right?
Yes. Probably still on the website today, but I really appreciate, honestly, that perspective, because I feel like maybe other folks wouldn't necessarily focus on that and actually have an approach. And so I appreciate hearing about that. And Kalina, as we've spoken about in sports and you specifically in major leagues, there's not a lot of female photographers. So I just wanted, and Black female photographers at that. So just wanted to know, from your perspective, like, what does that look like in conception and being heard? And, when you're like, want to work on a project, are you collaborating in a way? And are people hearing you in that space? Are you able to have not a like, ops seat at the table? You're actually able to share your opinions and thoughts. They're heard and taken.
As far as photography goes, my opinions are obviously warranted. There are times where I kind of have to force myself a little bit into conversations. I do mostly want to say that it might just be also that I'm kind of new and they're not necessarily used to, I guess, whoever the last person wasn't necessarily used to always being in every project. Whereas in my internships and all that kind of stuff, I was in everything. And so I'm just used to always just being included, even though there wasn't necessarily a role for me. I just like giving input and giving a different type of viewpoint. So I do find there is some time where I have to kind of push myself in, but I can't really necessarily say that it's just because that I'm a Black female in certain instances. As far as, and then of course, I mean, certain teams have certain rules when it comes to whether or not they have other people helping them out in different teams. I'm unable to have a team of photographers just because of how big the Cowboys is and how many people are on that field. It's just like it's not kind of practical in a way. So I'm trying to find different ways to kind of incorporate having other Black photographers, Black female photographers, women photographers in general in different projects, and maybe not necessarily working with the Cowboys, just with me in general, just helping as much as I can, talking to them, networking with them, and that kind of stuff. So it might not be like a direct role, which a lot of people will obviously want to have that kind of position, working with a team and working with another female photographer, but it's just one of the things I kind of have to make work, because that was a goal that I had for myself once I got this position. I was going to make sure that somebody, whether it be one person or 15, it was going to be people bringing in with me. Like it wasn't just going to be me and Chanel, it was going to be a lot of us coming in. And so that's just a goal that I want to have. And it doesn't even matter which team I'm working for. That's just what I'm going to do no matter what. So.
Yes, 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 commitment and persistence. And I hear you. I also, sorry, Marguerite.
That's a good job.
Yes, yes. And I was going to say, I also, I feel like I have that same attitude of like, I as a communications person, brand strategist, social media person, I'm always used to being in every conversation. So just like kind of building those interpersonal relationships in a virtual world also, and just trying to be there and let people know who I am is like the way that I hope people include me. I hope that in work and also just in like the larger like marketing, digital marketing, like world and conversation, I want to elevate as many people as I can. And I just praise you for doing the same, because yeah, as being a one of one, like you got to focus on your own work, but as much as you can pass it on, like hell yes. So
I don't want to interrupt. I am being kind of kicked out of the conference room. So I do have to go, but I really enjoyed this conversation. I wish I could stay longer, but
if
I don't know if there's like
if you have time to join on Slack, I will copy the questions because there were some specifically for you. And Marguerite and Sydney, I'll just ask the 2 questions that were for everybody to you if you've got to go, Kalina. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Bye. So
I bet it was a bunch of men kicking her out. Just kidding.
Probably, who weren't aware that she was on a fantastic webinar for everyone to hear. So this question is for you, Marguerite. It's coming from Carl Jones, who's a photographer that we know and love. He's asking, in your current role, what is one thing you feel that photographers lack and one thing that makes them stand out? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Stand out. The photographers I work with make the regular picture look different by using different lenses, putting themselves in positions where if 10 photographers are in place X, they go to place Y where no one else is. It is so key to make the picture look different that you don't see on Instagram and Facebook prior to our publication. That is number one, making our pictures look different, look special by the type of lens they use, the type of lighting they use. The one thing that I think sometimes photographers lack is their own ideas sometimes with the photographers I work with. A lot of times, we give them a lot of ideas. Maybe I'm a control freak and maybe that's why they suggest the ideas, but sometimes I wish there would be a little more collaboration than us as the editors always saying what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think that that's really important to be constantly brainstorming on your own and getting inspired on your own. That's very key. And then this is a question that I really wish Kalina could stay for, but this is coming from Elena Bolanos. What advice do you have for students trying to enter the field of photography? Sydney, let's start with you since you're a professor right now too.
Such a great question. Such a great question, because when I entered the field, it was different, and it's different than it is now.
I'm while you're thinking.
What?
I said I have an answer while you're thinking.
Yes, please, no, please take the floor.
Perfect.
I don't know, Elena is her name,
Yeah.
if she's in high school or college or whatever, but if she were in college, this is my number one. And if she wants to be in sports photography, is to 100% get yourself involved in the student newspaper. If your school has no newspaper, the yearbook. But if it's sports, really get involved in the sports information department. They need pictures of basketball, field hockey, lacrosse, swimming. They need everything. That is how you're going to create your portfolio when you're that young, to create that portfolio, to get the internship you want, to create that portfolio to go to grad school if that's what you want, to create the portfolio for the job that you want. That is like the greatest silver platter of events to photograph, and right there at your fingertips. And you are a student, you are going to get access that probably main media won't get. You can work with your sports information department. They can use your pictures. These pictures can get published in their media guides and so forth. But the day you graduate, it's gone. You can't just show up and go to the football game or the basketball game, depending upon how large of a school you're at, small of a school, how elite of an athletic program your school has. But the minute you graduate, it's gone. And you have to then be just like someone from Sports Illustrated, apply for a credential to go to these football, basketball, baseball games. And it's not easy. It's very difficult because there is a cap to how many people they want to have at these events, right? And they're not just going to give it to some person creating their portfolio. So that is so important. If it's sports photography, that's what I know, but I highly recommend that.
Thank you. That was a super thorough answer. And I hope Elena was listening. If not, I will be transcribing your exact answer directly to her. Thank you for that. And Sydney, what about you?
I mean, I feel it. I wonder if Elena's question was sports driven, in which case there's no better person to answer it than Marguerite. But I think, you know, in photojournalism and photography, it's not going to hurt you to develop relationships with photographers who are already in the field and to learn from them and to ask questions and get advice and get their feedback and just shoot. And I mean, if you're in college, much along the lines of sports, you have access to a kind of culture that you will not have access to once you graduate, and you can take advantage of that too, like a closeness of a part of our population that not a lot of people, like somebody from the Boston Globe, if there's a slim chance they're going to be able to come to BU and do an intimate story about a specific group of students on campus. So that's something you can take advantage of as a student. Yeah.
True. Very true. And I will just share, somebody just shared in the chat, this person, Remy Williams, said, I literally lay on the ground to inspire my students to shoot from different point of views. And I really love that answer too.
Yes, that's what I do, right? That's what I love. You know, I've worked with these photographers and I've done it for a long time. And how do we like keep doing it and not make it boring? It's like, what can we do today that we've never done before? And we've put photographers in the craziest places, or remote cameras. And if a remote camera is a low percentage, you know, you may shoot the remote the entire game, but make one picture, it's worth it, right? And yeah, I don't get like some people you put on assignment and it's like everything is seen from the eyes of a 6'4" photographer horizontally. Like they don't even turn the camera vertically. Yes, lay down at a basketball game instead of sit.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, I think that is our time today, ladies, and I really, really appreciate you both and Kalina sharing so much insight and just so much personal background also. I really hope everybody enjoyed, and if you're available, some people will still be messaging you in the live chat channel today in Slack, so I hope that you have a bit of time to pop in there and say hello to the folks that were listening. But thank you both for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.